we thought, well, you can open a remote office in Switzerland or you can open a remote office anywhere else. That's not going to actually change. You are already going to deal with the communication gap. If you think about it, in Europe, Berlin is a fantastic city. It can attract a lot of talent. The language barrier is also very limited. And we decided to come here and start it up.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 150. Why did Pix4d set up a research and development office in Berlin, Germany? For that question, we turn to Jorge Fernandez, Product and Solution Manager for Pix4d Berlin. Jorge is responsible for the vision of Pix4d in the agricultural industry. He is charged with advancing product strategy, managing internal engineering resources, and coordinating communications with key stakeholders and media. Backed with over 10 years of scientific research, Pix4d is the industry leader in professional drone mapping and photogrammetric software solutions. The dynamic and rapidly expanding company is based in Switzerland, with offices in San Francisco, Shanghai, and most recently Berlin. In this edition of the Drone Radio Show, Jorge talks about the opening of Pix4d's Research and Development Office in Berlin and how the company is positioning itself to support the agricultural industry. But before we hear from Jorge, I want to thank those of you who have been supporting my funding campaign on Patreon. For as little as $1 per month, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. Go to patreon.com/drone radio show to join the team. Now let's learn about Pix4d's move to Berlin from Jorge Fernandez and what it means for the agricultural industry. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Jorge to introduce himself.
My name is Jorge Fernandez. I've been working for Pix4d about 2 years and a half. I joined the team as a business developer. Soon after I started, the agricultural topic started to come strong. Eventually, I transitioned to more of a solution manager for agriculture, overseeing all the activities that have to do with agriculture. So from Pix4d Ag, obviously Pix4d Mapper as well, Sequoia, Pix4d Capture, all on a more agricultural context.
Jorge, can you give us a brief summary of what Pix4d does?
Pix4d measures from images, right? It's a professional photogrammetric software, and we convert images into 2D and 3D maps. Specifically in agriculture, I think it's quite unique that we also look a lot into radiometry and reflectance maps, which means that we convert the images from those fancy multispectral cameras into very accurate index maps that then the digital farmers, the agronomists used for variable rail application maps and all sort of crop protection activities.
Now, Pix4d is used in a lot of industries for mapping, but what are some of the ways that the software is used in the agricultural industry?
We've seen a lot of attention in the agricultural world around drones. We've done a lot of exercises trying to understand exactly what are the needs that need to be covered. If you really do your homework, everything boils down to crop protection and crop production. Those are the two main topics that the agricultural industry is trying to solve. Every farmer is looking into reducing the amount of inputs that they put in the land because that will save them money, as well as they are looking into maximizing the amount of yield that they could get out of that same land. So crop protection activities go from basic RGB digital scouting, where a farmer or a service provider will fly over the field and then they will present that data to the farmer, and then they will identify areas that, there is some machinery damage or there are a seeder row missing, things like that. It can also become more advanced, and if you use multispectral cameras, you do crop protection, but you leverage on the range of light that you can actually see with your naked eye. So things like red edge and near infrared images give information about diseases and or stress in the plants that might not be seen from a normal RGB image. So for disease detection or a spread estimation, it's also a really, really big topic. And this is something that farmers are extremely interested.
Do drones allow managers to collect data that they're not able to get otherwise?
If you use an RGB camera, then you're going to have, an spatially aware scouting approach. It's sort of like enhanced scouting. They already do it, but now they do it from the air and they see everything in context. So they can actually find trends that are not seen from the ground. But that's with RGB data, right? And that's what we can see with our eyes. If you use multispectral cameras, then it gets a little bit more exciting because you are seeing things that you can't actually detect with your eyes. And that's where, advanced disease detection or advanced trend detection starts to happen.
Are systems like Pix4d better suited for large farm operations? Or can they provide value to any operation, regardless of size?
That's a good question because there is always this discussion on whether this technology applies for the small farmer. I mean, if you live in Iowa and you have 20,000 acres of farm, there you might be interested in using satellite imagery just because the coverage and the operational costs, it's lower. Of course, the problem is that 70% of the time, the Earth is covered by clouds, so you can't see. And sometimes need to acquire data at very specific times, and you cannot rely on the satellite itself. So actually, drone mapping also plays a big role for the big farmers. On the smaller farmers, like more on the high-value crop side, this is also extremely interesting because satellite is not cost-effective, and they need to fly smaller areas where higher resolution information is already very important. Especially there, small efficiency changes actually are translated into better yields, and since it's higher value, is going to be of a benefit for the farmer as well. In both cases, it applies. We also forget most of the times that there is a lot of industry that is focused on breeding and seeding and all sort of activities that are also smaller farms, but they need to have a source of very high resolution data in order to make more objective decisions. So if you think about these big companies like Syngenta, KWS, all they have test crops worldwide where they need to acquire data on the daily basis almost to detect how these plants respond to different treatments, different weather conditions, etc.
Don't farm operations already have the ability to collect data through a variety of means?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, if you go to a trade show these days, what you'll see is these big digital farming companies. You have Ag Leader with SMS or Agfinity. You have Farmer's Edge. You have Climate with FieldView. You have tons of companies whose business is to collect as much information as possible, coming from all kind of hardware, from the tractor, from soil sampling, from satellite, from simple manual input from the farmer. These platforms are used to make better decisions, right? So drones are not something that stop the farmer to move forward, but it's a new layer of information that allows them to even increase the amount of layers that they take into account. So it all comes, when you ask me where do I see the usage of drones in agriculture, it's always two topics. It's crop protection and crop production. And on crop production, you really need just a soil map, a yield map, and some sort of layer of remote sensing data that will allow you to generate this variable rate application map over your field that will save from 5 to even 15% of input. I'll always remember, if you're a farmer that has 10,000 hectares, like one person that I made in the UK, they are spending only on nitrogen almost 300,000 euros. So if you find a new technology that helps them save from 5 to 15%, that's already very good return of investment.
Obviously, someone needs a drone and the sensors to collect the data. But what software is typically used to compile and manage the information?
As you said, you need a drone with a camera, and that could be an RGB camera or a multispectral camera. In order to acquire data in an efficient way, you're going to need to have some sort of flight planning system. For example, Pix4d Capture, it's a good application for that. You have already a couple drones that are exclusively designed for agriculture, like the Disco Pro Ag and the Bluegrass. But that's through Pix4d capture. Then you can also use EBSQs or DJI drones with a multispectral camera attached to them and then just generate maps. Once you have those images, what you'll do is you import them in Pix4d, and you will either generate an orthomosaic that is going to help you do some basic digital scouting, or you will generate the reflectance maps that then will be translated into index maps. And index maps are the first layer where the user is going to start doing some sort of analysis. Firstly, on crop protection activities. They will look at that map and they will identify areas that need further investigation, and then they will send a crew on the field to investigate what's going on. Next step would be to, based on an index map, generate a zonation map, which sort of aggregates that information. So now on an index map, you have every single pixel has some sort of value, colored from red to green, but there is too much information for the farmer. They cannot apply fertilizer 10 centimeter level. You need to generalize that information, and then you create these zone maps. That is probably the first layer that you can export to a farming management platform. Or you can generate a zonation map in Pix4d and then add some sort of labels and convert that zonation into a prescription map. And that layer alone can already be imported into the tractor and to do variable rate application.
In today's farming environment, who typically uses the software?
That's a good question, because that's actually that I always fight for. So when you think about a farmer, sometimes you also think about the person that works on the farm. Really, the people that are using this technology are farm managers, agronomists, crop scouters, are people that are already used to manage a number of digital platforms, and that they use this technology in order to run the farms more efficiently. Right? That's what traditionally I've seen as our main target. And then, of course, you have all the agribusiness people with the heavily funded research groups that do all sort of analysis on the type of seeds and the type of growth of very specific types of plants. But what is true is that more and more and more we see the concept of digital farmer coming up front. And this is people that, have tons of different equipment and sources of information, and they aggregate all this information into the digital platforms that I just mentioned, these farming management platforms. That's how they are called. So what we've seen is that most of the times use a third party, like a service provider, to start acquiring data over their field. But as quickly as they found where the information is coming from and understanding how this new layer of information is going to play a role in their operation, they want to own the workflow. They want to own the data, right? So I've seen in shows where people come and say, hey, I've been using a service provider. Now I know how it works. Now I want to use Pix4d, right? And actually Pix4d, it can be very complex, but it can be also very simple. From the moment you import the images, you could simply select a template that is called Ag Multispectral, and then you will go all the way to your index map. And that's where you already will be doing your analysis.
From your perspective, how well are farm organizations adopting and integrating drone technology?
We've seen definitely a lot of growth in the US. That's always the case. I would say that market is probably one of the most advanced in terms of digitalization of agriculture. But Latin America and actually Northern Europe are also heavily working towards this new digitalization. So those are the three markets that I would say that are blooming more. Then obviously you will always have South Africa, Australia, and then you will always be surprised on other countries that are actually heavily using this technology, like Somalia and Sudan. They are also quite heavily using this technology.
Do you think people are pretty much aware of the benefits of using drone technology, or do they need to be more informed?
Well, I think technology companies overall need to do quite a lot of work on educating and explaining this technology. I think agriculture is an extremely fascinating industry where they deal with very complex systems where there are tons of different variables that play a role. And we've seen that through regulation where governments are, putting a cap on the amount of inputs that the farmer could use throughout the year, or simply where farmers are already in the position to have so much information that they can leverage it in a way that they will run their farms more efficiently. There are really two ways where people are starting to come to this technology. But I think it's true that technology companies need to make an effort to understand what the needs are, because agriculture has been working without drones for years. And there are other layers of information that could also help them run their farms more efficiently. It's a joint effort on education, but also on understanding what the needs are.
Okay, so what makes Pix4d the right software for agricultural use?
So I think Pix4d was one of the first companies looking into what it means to generate radiometrically correct maps, right? If you think about an NDVI map, it's a combination of two bands, in this case is red and near infrared, to show you colors, right? And those colors are correlated with whether the plants are stressed or not. But there are tons of different indexes. If you go to a university, they will probably have 15 or 20 indexes that they've been using at a research level to try to identify stress indicators on the plants.
What's Pix4d's approach?
Pix4d has been putting a lot of effort towards understanding how radiometry works. And, in agriculture, you always need to make a number of maps throughout the season. And it's extremely important that those maps are comparable between themselves, right? Because if you fly on a sunny condition and if you fly on a cloudy condition, the amount of light reflected by the plants are going to be different. And if you don't take that thing into account, then you're going to end up saying, oh, my field is actually healthier when it's sunnier and it's not as healthy when it's cloudy, which is completely wrong. So Pix4d, through cameras like Sequoia or MicaSense Red Edge, where we have tons of information coming from the radiometry of the sensor, as well as the illumination sensors that these cameras have, helped us generate absolute reflectance maps, right? And that's the building block for everything that is going to come after. If you know you have some sort of disease in the center of your field, and then you apply a certain amount of treatment, and then you want to see how this evolves throughout the season, if you are not sure that you are comparing the same data, then you might be doing something wrong. So really focusing on radiometry and understanding reflectance in order to generate accurate and absolute maps is what I would think it makes the difference when it comes to using this software in agriculture. We've really focused on that, right? On understanding reflectance. And we have a really, really big team that is exclusively looking into how light reflects. And we are doing our best to come up with the most absolutely accurate maps possible. And, to have reflectance maps that are accurate is the building block for anything that is going to come afterwards.
In 2017, Pix4d set up shop in Berlin. What can you tell us about why the company expanded to Germany?
Pix4d has this software that we are already quite proud of in terms of how accurate it is geometrically and radiometrically. But what we could see is that we couldn't move so fast towards certain verticals, right? Because it's already a large software. There are many internally stakeholders that want to have certain features. I think we wanted to move faster than what we were actually doing. So Christophe eventually thought about the strategy and decided that maybe the best way to move forward was to open an office somewhere else and create a team that would look into a certain vertical in a dedicated way, right? So without being sort of constrained by the development needs of other industries. So that's how, I think it was somewhere in April, Christophe presented the idea to a couple of us, and then we decided to make it happen. So at that time, we thought, well, you can open a remote office in Switzerland, or you can open a remote office anywhere else. That's not going to actually change. You are already going to deal with the communication gap, right? And if you think about it, in Europe, Berlin is a fantastic city. It can attract a lot of talent. The language barrier is also very limited. And we decided to come here and start it up. We are now 17 people. We have development team, algorithm teams. We have marketing. And we also hired a fantastic regional manager called Henrik Batke, which was previously working as a senior director at Here Maps. And now we are trying to make it happen here.
So is the focus of the work mainly on agriculture? So
for now, we are working towards agriculture 100%. We want to make something that makes sense in agriculture. Pix4d Mapper originally comes from surveying industry, right? So a lot of the tools were around that. And those tools do not necessarily make sense in agriculture. So we are working towards streamlining something that actually makes sense in agriculture. That's the idea for now. But then, of course, the technology will always be applied in different industries. It's not necessarily exclusive to agriculture. But from the development point of view, from the UX point of view, everything is sort of tailor-made around agriculture.
Are you doing anything with machine learning?
I think the industry has reached a maturity point where generating data, it's already pretty common. Hardware is really good. Photogrammetry software is really good. But now it's time to really step up and give information to the client, not really need the client to interact with the data to do something, right? So we are now looking into, okay, what kind of machine learning tools could help our target clients to do more things with even less effort. I always like to think that the more this technology commoditizes, the simpler it needs to get and the more value it needs to provide. So machine learning obviously plays a really, really big role in it.
Many people in the agriculture industry have been around for a long time, and they have their own way of doing things. So what do you have to do to get them to consider a new technology like drones?
Agriculture doesn't need us to keep going, but at the same time, the pressure on the amount of population that we have and the amount of food that we need to generate is starting to increase. It's more of a relationship challenge, right? We cannot come into the agricultural world saying, hey, we're going to solve all your problems. We have amazing machine learning algorithms that are going to solve every single question you have, because that's not true. Most of the times we need to very carefully understand what they are looking for and try to make tools that address that exact need. And what I think it's going to be key in the future is to understand that they have tons of data to deal with, and that all this data is somewhere. All these digital platforms like Farmer's Edge or FieldView from Climate, they are acquiring all that data, and we are one more layer into that system. So that's something that we need to understand. Drones are not here to solve every single problem. It's a player within this big machinery, and we need to understand our relationships with everyone.
Do you do any outreach with the agricultural industries or any of the stakeholder groups?
Of course. One of the first things we did was to create this focus group where we have about 100 people spread out worldwide. Some of them Pix4d users, some of them not, where we have certain hypotheses and we ask them questions. So that's actually the focus group has been a fantastic source of validation for some of the ideas that we have.
What are some of the key issues or questions that you hear most?
The main question we get is, I have problem A. What index should I use in order to highlight that problem? They don't want you to give them an answer on the problem. You simply want to facilitate the decision and base that decision upon something that is reliable and objective. So it's really how to connect the data that is collected from the drones to the specific problem that they have. In most cases, it's them understanding what the problem is and looking into the index. But there is still something that we definitely could do better in order to help them do that in a more efficient way.
You were talking about some of the ways that you communicate with stakeholders in addition to focus groups.
We have the focus group, which is a fantastic source of validation. But we also have a workshop in the UK where we are going to gather a bunch of agronomists that want to know how to use drones in their business. So we're going to be showing them how to use the software. And then through the kind of questions that they're going to make, we will also try to tune and try to adapt to what they were looking for. And then, of course, going to shows and all sort of places is somewhere where you learn. And I think it's both ways. Every time I go to a show and I talk to someone, I learn something from them that I bring back to Pix4d. And I hope they learn something from Pix4d that they bring back to the business.
I know you've only been in Berlin for a short while, but where do you see things going from this point on?
We definitely want to bring value to the company. And I think that's the first thing that we need to prove. We also want to make sure that the agricultural industry understands where we stand and what we do for them, and really becoming a brand within agriculture for all sorts of drone mapping services, let's say.
Is there anything that we missed that we need to talk about?
Technology-wise, we think we've reached the point where the maps the Pix4d software generates are already really good for the industry. What now we are putting a lot of effort is on trying to understand this industry, understand how they work, and then understand the way they interact with a software like ours in order to maximize the benefit from using it, right? So we want to have something exclusive for agriculture that talks to them and that it really connects with what they do exclusively.
What excites you most about doing what you do with Pix4d?
What makes me the happiest of what I'm doing right now? Probably, I think this last year I went to Agritechnica, and for the very first time we had a booth. We were there with Parrot and Sequoia, and we were there with SenseFly. What it was beautiful was to see all these highly digitalized groups that have been using Pix4d Mapper for years and that are extremely satisfied with the kind of information that they've been getting out of it. People that work for breeding companies, people that work for seeding companies, people that have been using the very high resolution digital surface maps in order to make irrigation plans for their clients. So we saw sort of the high-end, cutting-edge group of people that have been using our software for years and that are extremely satisfied. But at the same time, we saw all this inflow of farmers and agronomists that are now getting to the point that they see where the value and what's the value proposition of this technology for them. And having the chance to explain them how it is and they telling you, well, if this is actually the case, this is something that I'm going to definitely try. And sometimes it's not about selling something that is extremely complex and it's going to make decisions for them, but it's just bringing them a new layer of information that is going to make them reach the farmer Valhalla or the farmer dream, which is less input, better yields. That's what everybody wants, right? And if they see in drones a new technology that can make that happen, they're going to be really happy. And the moment this starts to become a reality and they use it more and more and more, it's gonna exponentially grow in the industry.
And my final question, Jorge, what do you want people to know about the work that you're doing with Pix4d and its importance?
What we are doing now at Pix4d is to understand an industry that hasn't been exposed to us for so long. And once we understand how these flows work, this is something that can be extrapolated to all sort of other industries. It's already happening in construction. It's happening in search and rescue. It's happening in inspection. It's happening in all sort of industries. And I think Pix4d Berlin represents that effort on trying to connect with the industry that we are addressing in a much more profound way. And that will translate into a software that addresses their needs, that talks to them, that is with them where they are expected to be, you know. I'm not expecting people in the farm industry or in the agricultural industry to go to Intergeo or to the UAV Expo every year, but we are going to be with them at Agritechnica, InfoAg, we're going to be there at CropTech, all sort of shows where that's where the translation of technology to application is happening.
That's it for episode 150 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Jorge Fernandez of Pix4d Berlin. I want to thank Jorge for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about Pix4d Berlin or want to connect with Jorge, check out the website at pix4d.com, and it's pix4d.com. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1 per month, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to patreon.com/Drone Radio Show. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Goers.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.